Hello and welcome, Muggles, to the HPTV podcast. Episode, I don't know, 4 or 5. Well, there's still no news. I think we thought like something has got like by March. It's going to be kind of odd if they don't have some information out by then. But we did see there's been an interview with Alfie Enoch, who played Dean Thomas, and he's had a little bit of success. He was on that show How to Get Away with Murder, which I feel like the first 2 or 3 seasons were really buzzy, and he had said he'd be open to returning to the series in some capacity. And every actor's been asked. Like, it's long been said that like Tom Felton and Matthew Lewis want to do it, and I actually decided very recently I'm anti. I don't know it. It would you can't mix the worlds. It would ruin the magic a little bit. It'd be confusing for me. So no, I think no actors who appeared in the originals. I'm even thinking like, what if they appeared as like a kid and they just in a small part? It's useless.
For me, it's depends on their acting capabilities, like how good of an actor. For me, like those side characters, I don't mind, and I think Matthew Lewis actually looks so different now.
He's hot. Yeah,
he's hot now. Actually, I don't know now, but he was like 5 years ago.
He had a glow up period. We don't know now.
But he looks so different. Like, I want it as long as like it's done well. But if it's like awkward cameos or just throwing someone in for the sake of throwing them in and it pulls you out of the world, that's what I'm more concerned about. It's like, no Ed Sheeran this, Game of Thrones. Let's keep it in the world.
That was really random when that happened. Yeah. I was like, wait a second, is that shitty?
I love Ed, but it was bad.
It does take you out. But yeah.
Yeah, because you think some of the younger teachers now could be Dumbledore. Like, there really are. Like, there are obviously are ways. And yeah, if you do it as a cameo, it's kind of fun and maybe it doesn't take you out of it, but it's still, no one will talk about anything else.
I mean, and obviously with costume and makeup and stuff, if like the person doesn't look the same, but I think Alfie kind of hinted at being like Lupin, and I wouldn't hate that. I wouldn't hate someone around that age being Lupin. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's just going to be interesting to see what consistency that they bring. But yeah, there's not really been any significant rumors coming through that I've seen. You know, we toss things in the chat once in a while and something comes through. But I guess it's just time then to talk about, we're going to go book by book, film by film, however you want to do it. And we're not here to criticize the films. We're here to look at each film and think, what more could we get out of this story now that it's going to be a longer thing? And a lot of stuff came to mind for me, especially early on. I just watched it's the Philosopher's Stone here and it's on Netflix, which is very handy. I just watched it today. So we're going to jump right in. And the sorting hat for today is, I need you to sort this to where it lands in your movie ranking.
As an adaptation or just overall?
I think overall, but the adaption element is obviously what we're going to explore. So you need to know like how that factored into your decision.
But we're talking about like compared to the other Harry Potter movies, right? Ranking them like where it falls in the 8. Okay.
Yeah. No, all movies ever, Steve. Shawshank Redemption, Sorcerer's Stone.
Just making sure. No, if I would probably put it at number 3. I don't want to see what the other ones around it are just yet, because I know we'll go through those and talk about why. But it's because it's good. It comes with a lot of like key memories. It was the introduction to the world and stuff, which was really cool to see. So like a lot of those memories are tied to it, but it's imperfect. I think it's like it is a little more childlike, like we talked about before, right? It's more of a kid's story, and being what it is in that sense, like you know, some of that childlike awe, it's good. I really enjoy that part of it. But it's some of the acting is subpar. I think we talked before about some of the over-the-top acting. And some of my notes that I took, that's why I was making a face when you said we're not here to criticize the films. But like a lot of my notes are like things that got cut out that I feel like it would not have been hard to include, like just changing a line, you know.
That's going to be a whole that we're going to go to worst omissions will be next. So
Right. So, but just for those it brings it out a little bit. It's definitely not the number 1, but it's also, I don't think it falls to the bottom. It's in mid-range.
For me, I put this at a solid 4 or 5. I'm not sure. I'm sure I'll find its place as we go all through the movies, but the adaption part for me played a big role of it being so high up. I actually think overall this is the movie that's the most faithful to the book in the way of what happens, not in the feel of the book, which we'll get to as we go throughout, but I actually do think they do a pretty good job of hitting every chapter and major set pieces. I think it's charming. It's also a kids movie, and the first book is a children's book, so there's those things to it. And I mean, I give them a B+ for effort overall. Don't love it, but I feel like with what they were given, it's not the simplest thing. And I think coming from like film school background, I know how hard it is to like write a script, hit all the beats when you already have like something laid out, but you don't have like everything laid out. So I'm okay with it. I don't love it, but I'm okay with it. So I put it like 4 or 5.
It's been moving as you guys have been speaking, but I think it's number 3. I'll tell you why. I came away today being like, the movie's a little long and it gets a little bit boring at times. However, it set the tone for a lot of things that we like about the movie. There is some really good casting, the set design as far as Hogwarts, and like I was just thinking about the chess pieces, and there's bit like it does have some strong, the music, it sets some strong precedent. And I think it kind of does capture a bit of the whimsy of like a regular kid being thrust into this new world. There's like a brief moment where Harry's just sitting at the window, kind of looking at the grounds on his very first night in Hogwarts. And like, I think it's important to remember how much has changed. Now, the movie portrays that essentially as one day of change, but we know he went back to the Dursleys after he was with Hagrid. Like, I just think that it brings in that bit of wonder, and there's little iconic moments all along. Like, I think the nostalgia factor is strong, but I think Christopher Columbus deserves a lot of credit. I think he did a really good job with what he had. And like, we can complain about some of the adaptive bits and what we want to expand, and we will. But obviously, he had the smallest book to adapt, so it was frustrating with some of the changes he made because it is the longest. I'm pretty sure it's the longest movie. I think I've said that twice, so it better be true. But I think he deserves a lot of credit for a lot of things that went right. And I think the nostalgia factor is quite big in me enjoying it and going back to it. I almost view it as a little bit of a Christmas film now. And there's obviously only that little Christmas scene, but it's just like something about this childlike joy that it brings out. And so I think that's quite complimentary.
It's not the longest, but it's up there, according to Google. Goblet of Fire looks like it's the longest.
When has Google ever been wrong? Now that they're using that AI guy all the time, once in a while, blatant lies.
But I will say I started watching this last night and then had to finish, and I finished right up before we started recording. I think Mitchell probably heard it when I jumped on. The end credit music. I forgot how long it was. I was like, oh, I did not set enough time to watch this. But yeah, and just some reminders that the movie is directed by Chris Columbus, and it came out in 2001. So there's also elements that feel kind of like 2001's dated.
It happened pretty quick. If you think about when the books really took off in 98, 99, like it wasn't ubiquitous until then, and a movie was already in the works.
Yeah. And I think at this point, Goblet of Fire was the most recent book out.
I think Goblet of Fire came out in 2000.
They didn't have the entire series, which I think is a problem with the movies. They didn't plant certain things, and so that's why the movies don't match up to me. And I don't know how you people who have just seen the movies understand what's going on at all. But just some reminders around that's the place and time we are in the world.
One of my best friends loves these movies. He considers himself a pretty big Harry Potter fan, and he's finally read maybe the first 3, but he still once in a while will see something or hear something and need me to explain it, and I'm like, yeah, it couldn't quite do it. But I also see some opportunity with some of the little Easter eggs they could have put in this movie. One thing I did think about is like, are they going to be able to get the same actors for Lily and James to play it throughout all 7 when they're going to age and they're supposed to start pretty young and only be a cameo in this? Anyway, that's unimportant. We'll come back to some of those changes. Let's start negative. Let's go Howler first and say, what are the biggest either omissions or changes, especially as we've said, they had a runtime in a short book. What did they leave out that is most critical or precious or frustrating for you?
I have several notes on this, so I don't know. You just want me to go?
You get 3. You get 3. How about that?
I get 3? Okay.
You can do honorable mentions after Steven and I go. All right.
So there's just overall, I feel like there's a lot of times there was points where they could have developed relationships and that was sold for like funny bits or like shocking moments kind of a thing. So this is number one. These are going under it. But things like Dudley being like trapped behind the glass, like that just takes me out of the movie because then I'm like, well, how do you get out of the glass? And how do they do this? And how do they do that? Like things that don't happen in the book like that. And like the snake saying things where it's like supposed to be kind of like at this point, was the snake talking to Harry? What were they communicating? Little things like that. Hagrid thinking Dudley's Harry, like that, like little things like that where it's like
Yeah, it's like, why did you?
yeah, and immediately they take that and instead of having like you look like your dad and you have your mom's eyes, like that should have been the immediate first time you hear that, the plant of that, and like that moment that like Hagrid dropped off this little baby and now he's like this big boy. Anyway, things like that. The costume design, when I see everyone in Diagon Alley, I'm like, are we gonna break out into a Christmas Carol Muppet songs here? Like I get like there's the cloaks and everything, but it's like why did fashion freeze at that point? And I know the books are a little like that, but I feel like it's even worse than how the book is. Hagrid just leaving Harry at King's Cross, annoying.
Doesn't that?
Bye.
Oh no, he has to go on his own in the book.
Yeah, he just disappears and Harry's like, where do I go? Like this poor little boy. And I think so. Okay, but Peeves and the ghosts overall not being there.
The ghost kind of. I didn't have that much of a complaint about the ghosts in this one. Obviously, Peeves' absence, but they kind of disappear for the few movies unless they're really needed.
Yeah, and that's like those are the little things. Like this was an opportunity to plant those parts of the world while you had the time, and I felt like that time was used. And I get it. I get why they did a lot of those things because it's funny or it's like a moment, but I just feel like overall, yeah. Anyway, I don't know if any of those made sense, but that's where I am.
What I think part of it was is they were trying to draw on an audience that doesn't already love the books, and I get that because right they needed a wider movie audience in order to justify making more movies. But yeah, at the same time you said they traded some real character moments for some quick laughs. The only one, well, we're gonna get to things that worked later, right? So I'm not gonna go into that. No, a couple things like the omissions that really bothered me. The one of the biggest ones was Hermione's scene when they're going through the challenges to get to the stone. With the poisons and everything, because like Snape's challenge, I'm trying to remember what it's called specifically, but
well, when Hermione gets her house points at the end, I'm like, she didn't earn those. She didn't.
Right, she was like also there. Like, that's what she gets points for? I guess they did talk about like the devil snare thing is supposed to be her piece, but no, that is where we see that Hermione's like mind is almost as good as magic. There, right? Is like she's able to reason all this out and sends Harry through to the end, and that's kind of defines her place in the trio, right? Like, and that part really that irks me that they left that out. And then the other piece that I felt also was really key was the whole scene of them taking the dragon up the tower and like hiding from Pete and forgetting the cloak and right getting caught and everything. Like the fact that the way the dragon got to Romania was a side, like a mention of like, oh yeah, Dumbledore had it sent to like, no. This was the kids like went to all this effort. They figured out a solution. They took care of it and everything. And this way, it's just like, oh, Dumbledore did know about it then, and he just handles problems for people. Then it's kind of like, why would Harry even bother trying to get the Sorcerer's Stone himself? Dumbledore just solved stuff, So I feel like it didn't lead to that because that's what you see for the rest of the books, right? Is the kids getting in there and Dumbledore letting them get their hands dirty and figure their way through these problems, and that's stuff that Harry really needs in order to be ready to face Voldemort himself later. So it's just, I think it was one of those first instances of them taking away a challenge that we needed to see him face.
Dumbledore obviously has to become more human over the books, but the first book, if you read the first couple, he seems like he has all the answers and is so almost ubiquitous. And it's really weird to see the inconsistencies in the character, and this one set the tone for it. I'll just give a couple nitpicks here. One, the way that Hagrid, his whole understanding of Harry not knowing, and that all, I know it has to happen fast, but the way he says he goes from that to "you're a wizard, Harry," is the worst loss of dramatic tension. I hate that line reading more than I hate, "Did you put your name in the goblet of fire?" Oh, it's in Jimmy's notes. But it really, I just think that moment as he's processing that and revealing these things to Harry should have more impact. Also, I forgot how little Petunia speaks. I think as a Easter egg, they could have her have a little bit more going on in that moment. And the other thing is, weirdly, when Snape walks into his classroom, he's like monologuing. And it doesn't feel like he should be up there and saying those things. Not like he busts in being like, let me tell you about potions. And the way he bullies Harry is pretty accurate, though. Like, just remember, he's a childish bully.
Can I give you a note I put about Snape? I'm like, why does Snape feel like your overzealous drama teacher instead of like the slimy, creepy potions teacher? It's like every time he turns, it's like.
He should be like a slimy little, like, he was bullied and now he's greasy and he's. And
this is like back, instead of.
Well, he has power now. Right now, he gets control of the room,
He's
and everyone
like-
has to listen to him. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't feel any of that.
He's the kid who got bullied and then became a cop and is now just rude to everyone because he has authority. No offense to the cops. The one other thing. All right, Ron going into the forest. I don't know why that sticks with me. Just the whole punishment forest situation, and also the effects in that part are pretty bad. Like the forest going on and Voldemort coming at him, and the way that the centaur looks. I don't know why. It's just these little nitpicks more than anything, but I know that bothered me a lot when I first saw it. Oh, and more Quidditch. More Quidditch.
Yeah.
Well, that too. No, but tied to that, like the whole thing with Neville didn't even get the detention, right? Because he wasn't there. Like that moment when he is trying to warn Harry that Draco's going to tell on him or whatever, and him getting caught also, and then Harry, betraying him in that moment, and that like that's such character development for Neville. Like where he stands, and so then that courage he shows later means so much more because you've already seen kind of him on the outs and everything with that group, and it also shows like his development through the whole series as he grows into his own and he becomes a partner of theirs and the DA and all of that. And he's one of the only two people who comes, well, three who comes to help them and everything when they in book 5. And so it's that was a real opportunity for Neville. Sorry, that was my third one. I only got through 2 before.
I think there's a big opportunity in the TV show for Neville and Ginny to be really good, even better fleshed out than the books characters. And then it would be like, let's elevate like Dean and Seamus and Lavender and Parvati, even if they have like a little dramatic, snippy year stuff. Like that would be fun to see that part of being at a boarding school. They should all elevate to that next level as well. And she's always said that she said it one time, I think, that Dean Thomas, because he doesn't know who his dad is, but he was a wizard, has an interesting backstory. I want it. But let's move forward. So for the pensive, at first I was going to say, what are some tweaks they could have made? But I think we kind of talked about that with our big issues is if they would have just slightly done this more loyally or changed the tone here. I think Jamie's a bit more selective about that than us, but that's good. But let's look back and like, I think I've already covered this with just feeling like they introduced some wonderful things and some tone and just the idea of coming into a boarding school. Because like every time I would finish book 7 and start at 1, it felt so different and stripped down compared to the dense plot. So I just want to know, what is something that you think that they got right that they need to get right again?
So for this, I do understand. Well, I mean, this isn't like to get right again, but I do, like Stephen talked about, some of the things they cut out. Cutting like Harry, like having to switch rooms on the letter scene, or not. I actually had this as like, I was kind of okay with them cutting the dragon hand off and all that, even though it would have been cool to see. But I got like why some things were sacrificed for the sake of time. But I do, even though I already criticized the costuming, I do think they got the production design down very well. Everything seems full. It just brings you into the world. I do wish, and this is one of the things I left out of my 3 for the other thing was, but like starting with the Dursleys and really showing the Muggle world. So you have that juxtaposition from the Wizarding world. So I feel like they got the Wizarding world really good, but you just don't see the difference as much as maybe you would want to. But I do think the production design is really good. And I think what Christopher Columbus did is he planted that stuff really well. Like Mitchell talked about, like the world, the music. I think the acting was where like maybe he could spend a little more time directing people, but
moments of acting for you, because there's the chess match. I always forget how bad Ron is at, and now it's mocked on TikTok all the time. But overall, I'm like, there's not too many moments that. There's actually a lot of moments from Emma Watson that I'm like, oh, she kind of nailed. She gets less annoying way too fast in the film series. She should still grate on us a little bit, even though she's their best friend. So, were there any other?
I'm not like anti-kid actor, obviously, but I do give them like all the leeway in the world. Like they were kids and they were thrown into this, and I do feel like directorial decisions could have been made to like have them talk quieter or pull back or maybe spend more time on the adult's face in that scene, like things like that. But I actually watching this, like, Hagrid, Robbie, like, his performance,
How dare you?
I love Hagrid, and I actually think that's one of the best castings, but I was like, "Oh," like, it just is, like, very whatever, and then, like we said with Alan Rickman, one of the best actors of our time, it's just, like, very abrupt and, like, "I'm gonna say this line," and so
I
things like
think
that
that's
with
directed, but yeah.
the director. I'm not
Well,
blaming the actors.
I think that's part of what he determined Snape was going to be like at the very beginning, right? And then it continues through because he is very abrupt and very like. But I don't know. I've always considered him more of a a thinker. You know what I mean? Where he's more processing things before he talks. And here it just seems like he just jumps in with random stuff. No, I was going to say the one thing that I really liked about Robbie Coltrane actually was the the line I thought worked really well was every time he'd be like, "Oh, I shouldn't have told you that." Like that was always a good laugh, and it conveyed so much of that, like the relationship between Hagrid and the kids and how they're using him to get information that he shouldn't be sharing. Like it conveyed it really well and in a funny way. So I thought that was one of those easy laughs that they used that worked pretty well and didn't create it on me, and it's kind of defined Hagrid for me to a degree. But I would say the other things that were small was just places where the story didn't make sense. Things didn't feed into things, and so it could be done so much better. Like, for example, when they're fighting the troll in the bathroom, and Ron goes to, lift the club, and Hermione doesn't even actually know what spell he's trying to do, but she reminds him, remember, swish and flick. Like, why would she in that moment try and correct it? But she doesn't even know what he's doing. So how is she telling him what to do? So there's just moments like that where it's like no one in the story informed this person of what's happening. So why would they go and do the next logical thing if they don't know about the rest of it? So that kind of stuff annoys me. Another one similar to that is Ron's spell he tries to do on the train. And it's like to us muggles and to Harry, like for the first time hearing a spell, like, yeah, the sing-songy multiple words rhyming spell like makes sense. But then we're gonna find out like pages later or a few scenes later that that's not how any of the spells are. They're all Latin and stuff. So like why would you, and Ron would know that, having grown up in the wizarding world, like that spell has nothing to do with, any spell that exists. So that kind of like simple things like that, it was like, ooh, that would have been a good chance for, that's actually because that's in the books as well, the one with Ron and the spell. There'd been a good chance for them to kind of fix that and make it make more sense in the movies. Instead, they went the other direction in so many different places. But the one thing they did get right that I think I really like about the first book, and again set the tone for all the others, or the first movie, was the score. So like I really like the music. I still like we talked about going to Wizarding World of Harry Potter theme park, and like as you walk in and you hear that theme, the dun, 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 and you just you're there in the Wizarding World. So that is something that I feel like was spot on. And while I'm not the most musical of people, I don't know how they could have done it better.
There's small bits in the score too that like little moments of drama that I'm like, oh gosh, like kind of forget how much that's stuck in my head because it's not as obvious as the main theme. And one thing I will say about Hagrid is the only casting rumor has been Brett Goldstein from Ted Lasso and Shrinking, and I'm like, I love Brett Goldstein. No, I don't understand that one bit because he's gruff and British. Hagrid's not gruff. He's a sweet man.
It's a sleepy
I think they
man.
need more. They need more unknowns. I feel like if we can try to grab these people, I get why they might be doing it, and the casting rumors might be helping them. But like, I hope they get people who are good, but are not,
And willing
very
to
popular.
spend 10 years doing this. He's a busy man.
Exactly.
Like Maggie Smith spent 10 years of her life doing this, and may she rest in the most peace. Think about what else she could have. No, I'm just kidding. She actually, obviously, as McGonagall was one of the very, very good casting choices, in my opinion.
Totally.
Oh, boy. All right, so
Can I say one thing? I'm sorry on the pensive, because this is another thing we was the easy changes that could have been made. So I think I mentioned a couple of them, but one of them that really gets to me is when Harry and Dumbledore have their conversation in the hospital wing after. I feel like it's actually longer in the movie than it was in the books, but they don't talk about the right things. So there's a couple of really key lines that bothered me. And so the first one was when Harry's trying to explain to him, like, oh, I was trying, and Harry's saying, oh, I couldn't have kept him off the stone much longer. Like that was what, and he goes, no, not the stone, boy, you. The effort involved nearly killed you. For one terrible moment, I was afraid it had. As for the stone, it's been destroyed, right? So, like, there's just this thing where you get immediately from Dumbledore that, no, Harry's important. And we don't know to this point why or he's so important, but that, like, he's more important than the mission, right? He's more important than the stone in this case. Like, even if Voldemort had managed to come back, Harry is more important. And that's a big part of their relationship. And then the other piece is just where he goes, it's actually the next line. He goes, destroyed. He said, but your friend Nicholas will know. And he goes, oh, you know about Nicholas? You did do the thing properly, didn't you? And so it's kind of like, okay, you're gonna see that this is a smart kid, that he's working these things out, that he's figuring out, and like they cut those lines. I'm like, come on, like we need those in there and it wouldn't have been hard to replace the lines they put in with those lines without meaningful ever. So
And
sorry to keep
that relationship is so important. But by the end of the movie, I will say I was a little tuned out. Maybe it's because I've seen it so many times and it was long, but my notes from the beginning are so much better. So
yeah. Wait, can I give my
go.
easy changes real quick? A lot of the color correction on like in Hogwarts and everything is so monotone, drives me nuts. Like it's supposed to be a magical world, and I'm not saying I need everything shiny and gold, but it's just like almost like sepia. Like I can't stand it. Like save those bleak moments for like
sepia, okay?
Like it's like, this is Harry walking into this world, like like this is really exciting to him. And then Quidditch, Mitchell mentioned, but like not even showing more Quidditch, but like showing the match in a way that you're invested in who's gonna win or anything like that, instead of just swoosh swoosh. And then just overall the pacing and dialogue, and then the directing, like everyone's performance feels very one note. There's a lot of yelling, like, and Harry like yelling to wake up Ron in the middle of the night. I'm like, there's other people in the room, like things like that.
Yeah.
And just developing Harry on a deeper level, like giving him the quiet moments with him in the Sorting Hat, like giving us those moments, even though there's not a ton of that in the book, but like really playing up the few moments of that we get.
Anyway. Oh, the Sorting Hat! I didn't even talk about that. That scene hurts.
So I have the movie going in the background on mute, just like it's incepting me. And I was thinking, I was like, ooh, well, in the new one, do we want to hear the Sorting Hat be unsure about Hermione, and Ravenclaw maybe, or like, it's funny that it doesn't even quite touch Draco's head, but he says Slytherin. But when it's Ron, he's got to say, I'm like, for Ron, it should be just as quick, I guess. But that's the thing. We could go scene by scene. Maybe we will. Maybe we'll have time.
Well, and is there like why I didn't love that the Sorting Hat like had a mouth and was like talking, like, I mean, audibly for everyone to hear, because it was kind of like the part between him and Harry was supposed to be just him and Harry. So I get that they're kind of like treating like it's mumbling, but I feel like everyone could hear that, and I don't know what the solution for that is, right? Like in a visual medium, do you pull like a Black Panther and they like are in like a ethereal world or something like that while they discuss this with the Sorting Hat or something? I don't think that works either, but hopefully they can find a cool way to do it that's better than just like mumbling between. That's the
kind of thing where they can just make a different choice. That could be kind of fun. And that when we talk about, Hagrid kind of saying, oops, shouldn't have said that. That was an additive thing. They're going to have to do some things in this to differentiate it, where they add something, they choose a really different style. One thing I love that they do much later is the way that they show the tale of the three brothers, but that's a very different thing from the rest of the entire series. And I wonder if they'll, they do some memories and some flashbacks and stuff. I wonder, like Pensive, are they going to choose a different way for us to immerse ourselves in that? Anyway, we're going to move to the Marauders map, which is maybe the most important part. And this is, first we're going to start with what areas of the book most need to be expanded for the show. Because there are actually a couple scenes or a couple elements of the book that I'm like, you can kind of cover it. And we want to spend some time with these people. Like, we want that relationship with Harry and Hermione and Ron to kind of go through its little bit of a roller coaster and before it lands. We will next talk about literally how to maybe divide the book up. But I just noted that Hagrid comes in at 12:53. So 12:53 plus, 4 or 5 minutes after that is how long we get the Dursleys. And Harry sees Hogwarts. Our Hogwarts reveal is at 38:58. So I think the main one here is just what are the key things that need to expand. And I guess I will start with, I think we need to understand how miserable Harry is and how, like, we kind of get how abusive the Dursleys are, but I really want to get to know that way. And that's why I'm already like, should they drop 2 episodes at once? Because we don't want to put the magic or Hogwarts too far out, but you kind of need to get that feeling of who Harry is as a non-magical person first. But what are some expansions that you guys think, here's where we spend the time, that's going to pay off later?
My first piece is, I do think that if we're going to make the case for future seasons, right, for this to keep going, like, I think I would say they probably need to err on the side of more episodes than fewer. I feel like it could be done in 5 or 6, but I feel like if we're really going to flesh it out, we're really going to create an immersive world and suck people into it. I think they need to take time to do the world building. But then pacing becomes an issue, right? Because like you said, even with the first movie, it was one of the longer ones, and yet there were some boring parts where it's lacking. So I would say I would want them to err on the longer side. I mean, give us 8, 9, maybe 10 episodes. But like you said at the beginning, I think that there's a very again, I think I've talked about the show a few times with you guys, but Silo is very interesting because the first episode, the second episode, the third episode, each of them is kind of their own thing, and then you meet the main character. So like, not that this would necessarily work in this case, but I do like the idea of spending a whole episode on meeting the Dursleys, and then even Harry, being dropped off. You have that kind of in the middle, and then how glum their life is. And at the end, Hagrid shows up, right? And you get some flurries of magic and some curiosity of like, oh, this is going to take off now, and then you go into episode 2. I think that'd be a good way to, like you said, get and that's where you use all your sepia, Jamie. You get all the boring Muggle world is glum and gray, and then you move into the Harry Potter, the magical world, and it's just
and I
so
don't
much
even want it
different.
necessary. I want it to feel like our world, and then we go into like the more magical world. So it doesn't need to be sepia. I was just complaining about this, but I agree. I feel like planting like Harry's home life, like growing up the way he did, because it just, again, we need to like invest in Harry. That's what's going to move us through the series. So like, we need to feel bad for Harry. We need to like understand, why, and take that all on. Like, this kid is like a victim in a lot of ways, which as a child you don't really notice. And so I think it's also going to be playing off of that. Like, it's also like a kid's TV show, but seeing the Muggle world starting with the Dursleys, I completely understand why they don't start with the Dursleys in the movie, but I feel like it's a missed opportunity to plant them and their relationship with Harry and carrying that throughout. Like, so those things, I think like it could be within the first episode we get to where Hagrid shows up, if it's an hour-long episode, and then like other things expand for show, like getting to know side characters a little bit more. I don't need like a ton. I don't need like to run off with any of the side characters, but it's like Seamus. I wish
He
my
just
husband
blows
was here, 'cause
stuff up, apparently.
he does the best. My dad's a Muggle, my mom's a witch, or whatever. But like, that's all you get of those people is like one line of like, but it's like, so you get to know Harry better. Although in the books, it's not necessarily great about doing that either. Getting to know the side character much, but I feel like they could do that a little bit more. And then, I don't know, my overall is like just pacing in general and expanding moments out and those quiet moments to where we like build up those relationships and understand like why people care about Harry and why Harry is confused and why we're probably gonna be confused.
I think those first few episodes sketch themselves out quite easily, actually. I see how you could create a full up and down story out of each of those. I think it's more in Hogwarts that they're going to have to really pick what event is a main event. One thing we didn't talk about was the duel with Malfoy. Like, I think that could be sketched out. I think him being a bully and like kind of getting more of a good dynamic out of that. Like, there are lots of elements that could be fleshed out and be like a climax of an episode, but they have to make each one individual have some growth and some interest. And if we did a bottle episode, which would be cheap because money does matter here, where they were in one class for 40 minutes, and that really gave time for Jamie's so because you let some of those characters have like something to do, like one of those side characters actually have a storyline in that episode, and you get to just spend time with these people, and that could be worth a lot. And remember, these episodes, your average episode of television was 44 minutes, right? Back in the day. These could be 44. And then they could have one that's 54. Like, I don't know if they should range as much as Stranger Things does, but maybe really play within that 40 to 60 minute range and be like, look, we have a great story that we're going to tell, and we're going to do it in this. I mean, Disney Plus is already kind of doing this with the Star Wars stuff and Percy Jackson and stuff, but I think that they need to be able to tell those individual stories. So maybe it's 10 episodes, but they're not each 55 minutes.
Well, that's my thought, is like, this book is a pretty short book, and the movie within the 2 hours, like I said, it hits each chapter. It hit, which is the only movie. I mean, Chambers gets pretty close, but it's the only movie that's really able to do that because it's less content they have to cover. And so I could see them either doing a quick 6-episode season and then just like kind of getting through it, or stretching it out to 10 and just letting them plant the world and the characters better, but it's gonna be holding people's attention, weighing, do we like plant more for future seasons, but are we gonna have future seasons? So it's gonna be interesting what they do. But I came down with a solid 8 episodes. And then for bottle episodes, I don't know. I think it's so much more important to move the storyline. So if you're gonna do a bottle episode, it really better be a moment that's moving the story along. And I just don't see in this first book, even in the book, like it's pretty crazy how fast you're moving from this to this in the book. I don't know where we spend enough time for that. Maybe the forest or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, it would have to be. That's the thing. I want it to be a bit more lighthearted, but you're right in that there's not like one event that like I could see it in future books. The first VA, like there's lots of things. But you're right, man. I think 8 to 10 is going to be where they're going to land. I'd err on the side of shorter if they're going to save money, and especially if they're going to try and shoot some of 1 and 2 back to back. Well, I want to just address this before we leave. The beginning of the book, I wonder if they should start with Vernon going to work and some of the bizarre stuff that's going on. It's going to be kind of ugly 90s London, but feel very grounded. Because the other thing that they could do is start with Lily. They could start with Lily dying. That'd be a dark way to start a kid's show. But they could start with like the Voldemort flashback.
But I do think it will be fun. That's what I had in my notes, is like starting with Vernon and then letting like the magical world trickle in, and like, you know, like him just walking down the street and then he doesn't even notice, but we see someone in a cloak past him. Like things like that, I think I could just see it now. It'd be so cool, even though we know that, but like hopefully for like the unknowing viewer, they would be like, wait, what's happening? And then like the Dursleys being like, oh no. Sorry.
Well, and so my bottle episode idea was, I think, and I think it could work in a classroom like you were talking about, or something, or in the common room, where Harry really comes to understand like how bad Voldemort is, and because I mean, he's the guy who killed my parents. Seems in the movie seems to be all the motivation Harry needs to like go through the trap door and do all the crazy crap he does. I don't think that there's a lot of like, no, I'm actually trying to prevent the return of this tyrant, right? Who, you know, but he doesn't even ever get that information about how bad Voldemort is, what he actually did, and then the motivation later for it. So I think there could be a really cool bottle episode where Harry just sits and talks to some, or visits different people in the castle and finds out like, hey, like, what's going on with this? Like, how many people did he really kill? Like, I feel like there's some cool things that could happen there where you're just kind of focusing on those, that information, and then the end, it would be so much more impactful.
Let's do real quick.
Not Legacy.
Before we do the Golden Snitch, which will be what we think is most critical for this adaptation to set us up for specifically the Sorcerer's Stone to set up the series for success. Do you guys have? We can do a lightning round. Maybe we've all kind of done this as we go. Do you have a lightning round of notes that you want to spew or ask? I'm going to start with a couple of quick ones. First is they call the forest the Dark Forest, and I hate it. It's the Forbidden Forest. He says it's forbidden but calls it the Dark Forest. Also, later in the films, they call it the Black Lake. We don't name the lake. It's the lake. And if it was going to name the lake, it would be a loch because it's in Scotland. This is something I need from you guys. Do you want hats? Should the students wear hats? Because in the books, that kid is wearing a hat. Should it have a brim? No brim. They dropped the hats after the second film. What are we doing with hats?
I think just logistically, as someone who used to assistant direct a lot, I understand not having the hats. It's a lot to deal with for the... I'm like anti-hats because those hats look foolish, and I understand why they got rid of them.
They do, and yeah, but I get if you had brims, you'd have the shadows. You'd have so much to deal with. I wonder if it's just for certain...
And maybe special events. Yeah, special events. Maybe when you're outside, you wear your hat. I don't know.
Also, we've kind of talked about this in the books. There's kind of this unevenness of whether, like, under robes they're just wearing Muggle clothes, but yeah, in the fourth book, it's like, oh, these adults have never worn Muggle clothes. This guy wears a dress because he doesn't know. Like, I don't know. There needs to be some sense, and the robes do change. They're like, is it a full-on robe? Does it have the Hogwarts crest? Does it have the house crest? Does it have? Are they wearing like a white shirt and a tie or a jumper under? I guess you have to have some variants, but want some consistency. So they've got. That's what I'm just saying. Whatever they do this season, season 6, the Hogwarts uniform needs to look reasonably the same. And then I wrote Lee Jordan down, and I don't know why I wrote that note, but I hope he gets a little bit more of like. It would be nice for Fred and George to kind of have a third to play off of. And I want Fred and George to be short also, because they're supposed to be short kings. And you can't know. You couldn't have known that Daniel Radcliffe was going to be that much shorter than Ginny Weasley, but he was. Anyway, that was my lightning round.
Give the kid an apple crate. Come on. No, but I think that I think that's one of those side character things. I know we've talked about that quite a bit, but I think of later in the books, especially when everyone's dating everyone. Like, I think there's so many like fun little scenes to explore there of the teenage drama of so and so cheated on so and all of that. But I think Fred and George and Lee George is a perfect example of that. But no, that's really, I got through all my notes except for some of those side stories, especially some of the love triangles and things too. I think could be pretty entertaining.
Are they going to show a dragon purring in Harry's chest as he burns with envy? I do say J.K. Rowling needs some work on her romance writing, but I do enjoy most of the silly like dating stuff, especially in Goblet of Fire and Half-Blood Prince. Like, I'm here for it. More of it is fine with me. Jamie, what about you? Did you have any extra notes we need to hear?
I don't know why, but I did feel the need to write, blow up, you told me my parents died in a car crash. Just something about to deliver that line. Too much. Stop yelling all the time, everyone. Not meeting Draco earlier and developing him more as like the ongoing.
Yeah, we could meet him in Diagon Alley. That would be good.
Yes, I'm excited to see that. That's something I want to see. And just developing him more because, yes, there's the big bad overall, but like by the end of this movie where people think that he's gone, but developing that very rushed. I'm going through my notes because I mentioned some of this stuff. Not having the flute and like why plant that you played the music to put him to sleep and then they don't actually do that and just jump under Fluffy. You guys talked about all the challenges, talked about the color correction, pacing and dialogue. I've written in here like 5 times.
Oh, you have some notes for you, Christopher Columbus. We need to get you directing.
He's gonna be mad at me.
With color correction, a lot of people are complaining about the color correction in Wicked, and I'm like, I thought that was just the vibe they were going for. I thought it looked good.
I like that. Wicked. That's all I really have. I think like I've hit on pretty much everything of those, but yeah, nothing killer that. And I did. What is this coming up? Oh, Neville, just in general, also developing Neville more, which I think one of you hit on, because Neville plays a really important role, and like I understand why they want to develop the 3 main and take Ron into the Forest and stuff, but like those were just
again, that's something that they didn't know at the time, right? How key
how important
Neville would be, right? They didn't know that in book 5 we're going to find out he could have been the chosen one, or that he's going to be the ringleader of the gang at the end of book 7 and leading the battle of Hogwarts and all of that. So now that we know that, I think they understand so that he can.
Well, hopefully, that's what I know. That's what my message to the writers and showrunner. Now you know.
Jamie, I don't think there's a world where you enjoy this series very much. I think you're going to be angry at something significant every episode.
Well, and I will tell you guys, overall, I actually do enjoy the movie. This is just Jamie. Don't get me going. But overall, like if I don't overthink it and I'm just watching it, I'm like, it's cute, it's fine. I'm like fine with it. But
there are going to be things that they do a disservice to. There's going to be a character. There's going to be a storyline that they omit or add because this is still an adaptation, and an adaptation is not should never be perfect 1-to-1 with the book. So there are going to be things we agree with and disagree with, and that's the thing. Lord of the Rings is considered a great adaptation, and it has to cut out so much. And even the first 4 to 5 seasons of Game of Thrones, people are like, they did a great job. But if you read those books, even not just adding the storylines that come in book 3, you have to omit so much. So Harry Potter, they can be pretty dang loyal, but they have to make certain story changes to keep it interesting for the medium.
Well, and it's such, again, I mentioned this, I think, in the first or second episodes, like, it's such a personal thing, and it's how you take in movies and films and books. I'm like, once we get to, like, different movies, like, I am a Half-Blood Prince movie apologist. Like, you guys will be pissed on how much I love that movie, because it's not a good adaptation, but I think it's a great movie. So it's, like, what you take in, and, like, and for me, overall, it doesn't have to, like, it's more about, like, capturing the spirit of the book, and my favorite, which is Deathly Hallows Part 1, it does it so well that you forgive so much stuff because it feels right. And so you can't capture that for everyone. Who knows what's going to feel right for you that feels right for someone else, We all have our own perspective.
I think after this, I might say I am not going to watch these movies again. Not ever, but between the time we finish the 8th movie podcast and the show comes out, because my mind is kind of poisoned. Sorry, that's a negative word. With some of these characters, where like they are a huge part of how I think that. Where I'm like, there is there is a certain attitude and innocence, and I complain about how different the characters are in Cursed Child. Like, there is something where these characters are a little bit different in the movies and books, but I've melded them. Anyway, let's
Like, call me the hater. Call
move
me the
on to
hater.
the final. I'm not saying you're a hater. I'm saying you will find something that I just worry is going to outrage you.
Well, I'm an over analyzer of everything. I did really good in my script analyzation class.
No.
Okay, guys.
I just want you to have a good time.
I will have a good time. That's the problem. You guys just okay.
What you enjoy.
All right, final bit. Golden Snitch. Most important thing. Yeah, just what is going to happen in this first season that is going to set us up for success. We've kind of talked about what changes we didn't like, what adaptation elements we did like, and we've kind of addressed these things a bit through. But is there one specific thing that they can do right that is going to make season 1 like a success?
Well, I think whatever it is, it's going to be what pulls people to watch season 2 or on through the series. So for me, I think I mentioned it before, but it's really building up the relationship for Harry, making him a really good protagonist, feeling bad for Harry, investing in Harry. And I think also the element of Voldemort, and in this movie does not end this way, but ending with the possibility that Voldemort is still alive, because at the end of this movie, Harry just kills Quirrell, but in the book he passes out, and you don't really know what happens in the in between. Obviously Dumbledore or someone comes in and helps, but we need I don't even say a cliffhanger, but you're invested in this kid. What's going to happen next? And is this big bad really gone, or what's going to go on here?
I think two things. One is, I think we've already talked a little bit about this, but it's just, it has to be magical, right? You have to feel that stepping into a new world thing. And I think we talked about the contrast between being in the Muggle world, being in the magical world. I think people watching it, and you get that I don't know, that childlike awe of wow, this is freaking cool. If I could actually do that, I would totally go. And just a certain amount of jealousy of, Harry gets to go experience all these things, and we're stuck here in the Muggle world. If they can convey that, I think that will be massive. But I think what the other piece is tied to what Jamie was talking about, and that's just the cliffhanger piece, because the downside of having a story that's been told and the books are out there, people know how it ends, right? But how do you still build that tension so that they want to be, they need to go see the next episode, right? They need to see what they do to resolve it. And so and it's tricky, because you need to be faithful to the story, but you need to be able to change enough to make that intrigue for that next episode, the next season, prominent for people. And I don't know if it's through creative storytelling with those side characters. I think there could be some of that where, your cliffhanger is who's Ginny actually going to end up with, even though we know this part of the story, what Harry's doing is going to go a certain direction. I don't know how they do that, but I think that's got to be there. There's got to be really that need for season 2.
If we change who people end up with, I'm okay with that. And
No.
it will be interesting if they could move the order of two things. They could say, okay, we're going to do the dragon thing after this. There are some things that don't need to flow how they flow in it. But I don't know if they can change the outcome of one without, because there are things that happen in these first book that wouldn't have a huge domino effect that would keep some intrigue, but then you can't just do it as a cheap device. So, and interestingly enough, because I'm not the biggest fan of Chamber of Secrets as a movie or book, so I think it's almost the most opportunity where they have to make it fun and plant it. It is a planted seed for some huge things later on when it comes to the Horcruxes. I think they almost have the most opportunity with that book to make something better, and that's where almost we could start. We're not going to, but you could start questioning J.K. Rowling and be like, "Ooh, what she got better as a writer." So it's what could we maybe do that actually does change a storyline, that gives a true cliffhanger or does a true change? I'm not saying this is my recipe for success. I'm just saying they're going to have to start questioning her a little bit and think of what can we do to make this a little bit different, but keep the spirit of the plot and keep the spirit of the magical world and the characters. As long as the characters are loyal to themselves and to what she developed, I think we're okay. My main key, and this kind of goes with keeping that intrigued, but I think it's episode to episode. I think this needs to be really high quality, where even if people aren't what's going to happen next, they're I enjoyed watching that, and it was so well made that I want to watch the next one. And the word of mouth buzz needs to be so good that casuals who are I might watch it, but I might just binge it later on. It needs to have some heat while it's going. So we need the episodes to be so good and have individual plots within them that make people feel like I want to be there watching the new episode as soon as it comes out. So, I mean, I guess it has to be good, is what I'm saying. But I think
To be good, make a good
individual,
show.
like there are episodes that people get excited about, and there's just I'm very online and I listen to podcasts about shows I like and stuff, obviously. So, but you can tell the buzz is like, my wife is not that kind of person, but she'll know if people are talking about it or aren't. And so, like, here, The Traders, if there's a great episode of The Traders, she's a teacher, they're talking about it in the teacher's lounge the next day. But if there's just a run of the mill episode, it's like people watch it, but it's not water cooler producing. And so, I mean, Traders has the advantage of very much being a cliffhanger, but it needs to draw people in that way where it's just like it needs to be talked about. And so that's a tall task.
I do.
Well, and
I do not envy the creators having to hit these. I'm happy that I'm on the other end. I get to criticize it the whole way along. I don't have to actually produce anything.
I think too, it's like picking your battles and sticking to whatever you know. So if your main goal is to develop like the Snape Harry relationship, and you know you're gonna do that throughout mixing up movies and books through the 7 books, like then you're gonna stick with that, and you might have to drop this and this, but like just being consistent, which people are missing from the film. And I really think you can really play on the fact that people who like the movies and have watched the movies, if you're feeling like, hey, this is going to be more loyal to the book. So if you're curious why you're confused about this thing happening, or like why this character suddenly appears, then watch the show, because that's going to expand that world for you. And I like Stephen's point about like just playing off the magic and the excitement of the world, because I think that's why we all picked up the books. We were all kids then, but like it was exciting.
But they
like,
need to get kids need to get excited about this. And so this first season, because it's going to be younger, that magic needs to, of course, have that quality and excitement that's going to keep us engaged, and then it needs to bring in new people. And there are a lot of non-readers out there who consider themselves big Potterheads. And like, if I were them, like I think of Tim, I think he'll be excited to see these because he doesn't have to read, and he can still be like, oh, I'm going to get a richer version of the story that I like so much. And I have friends that love the books that hate the movies and won't watch them. So maybe they'll give this a try and say, is this going to make me feel what I felt with the books that I didn't think the movies could deliver? By the way, other Tim. So Timmy C loves
Tim
the movies. Tim A hates the movies, and so does Jason. So it's like I have 2 friends named Tim, and they're on opposite sides of the Harry Potter.
When we first met Tim, we got a message from Tim A. I just said his last name anyway, but he messaged me messaged us because I posted a picture of me watching the movie. He's like, "Those movies are the worst ever."
I will tell him that we spent this time somewhat bashing the movie and seeing what could be better, because we want it to be better. All right, Muggles, if you want to get in contact with us, we are on all socials at HPTVPod, or the email is HPTVPodcast@gmail.com. And leave comments below on Spotify, YouTube, whatever you're watching for. We're going to start getting more active on socials now that we have some episodes down, and we're kind of getting the hang of some of this, and hopefully we can spend more time on it and continue to upgrade the experience and everything. But thanks for tuning in.
Oh, shout out to our fan, Rachel.
Yes, #1 fan.
Rachel from Minnesota.
What house is Rachel in?
We love you. Oh my gosh, I can't remember what Rachel we decided.
All right, we'll report back.
I think she's a puff.
Tune in next time to find out what house Rachel is in.